Good evening, dear listeners. As the day gently fades into the embrace of night, I invite you to settle in, find a comfortable position, and allow the soothing cadence of my voice to guide you into a state of deep relaxation. Tonight, we embark on a journey through time, exploring a topic that may seem distant and perhaps even mundane: the meticulous history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits. In a world where the clamor of modern life often invades our peace, it is essential to take a moment to unwind, to let go of the day's burdens, and to embrace the calming presence of history. Our minds may wander to the bustling streets of ancient Constantinople, where artisans toiled diligently, their craft intricately tied to the very fabric of daily life. As you listen, allow your thoughts to drift like leaves floating on a tranquil pond, unhindered and serene. Tonight, we will uncover the remarkable, albeit tedious, evolution of waste management practices in the Byzantine Empire. We will delve into the intricacies of regulations that govern the treatment of byproducts from the tanning process, a practice that transformed raw hides into valuable materials for armor, clothing, and countless other goods. Amidst the grandeur of imperial palaces and the fervor of religious devotion, we will discover how these regulations shaped the environment and community life of the time. Picture, if you will, the ancient tanneries, places filled with the rich, earthy scent of leather and the soft sounds of water flowing as it cleansed and prepared the hides. We will explore how Byzantine authorities sought to manage the byproducts of this essential industry, ensuring that waste did not tarnish the beauty of their beloved city. It is a narrative woven with threads of innovation and compliance, revealing the empire's commitment to both craftsmanship and communal health. Through our exploration, we will encounter the various methods employed to handle waste, from rudimentary practices to early forms of environmental regulation. You may find it fascinating to learn how these ancient techniques resonate with modern principles of sustainability and compliance, echoing a timeless quest for balance between industry and ecology. As we journey deeper into this historical landscape, you will hear about the compliance audits that ensured adherence to these regulations. Imagine the quiet diligence of inspectors as they navigated the labyrinthine alleys of the city, ensuring that tanneries operated within the bounds of the law. This meticulous oversight reflects a broader narrative of responsibility and stewardship, a theme that reverberates through the ages. So, dear listeners, as you prepare to drift into a peaceful slumber, allow the gentle unfolding of this history to cradle your thoughts. Let the stories of Byzantine tanners and their waste management practices lull you into a state of tranquility. Each detail is a soft note in a lullaby, reminding us of the care and consideration that once shaped a great empire. In just a moment, we will step back in time, immersing ourselves in the rich tapestry of Byzantine history. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let the serene sounds of the past wash over you, guiding you into restful dreams. The world of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management awaits, a fascinating tale that will soothe your mind and spirit, preparing you for a night of deep and restorative sleep. Now, let us gently transition into the heart of our story, where the echoes of the past invite you to relax and unwind amidst the calm of history. The history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits is a rather intricate and largely overlooked facet of the broader tapestry of Byzantine administrative practices. The earliest available records concerning waste management in the Byzantine Empire can be traced back to the reign of Emperor Justinian I, who ruled from 527 to 565 CE. During this period, the city of Constantinople emerged as a significant hub of commerce and industry, including the production of leather goods, which necessitated the establishment of regulations governing the disposal of tannery waste. In the year 529 CE, the Codex Justinianus, a compilation of laws and legal interpretations, was promulgated. Within this extensive legal framework, the first recorded references to tannery waste management can be found in Book 7, Title 23, which addressed the environmental impacts of tanning processes. This title specifically mandated that tanners were to dispose of their waste in designated areas outside the city limits to prevent contamination of public water sources. The location for such disposal was specified as the outskirts of the city, near the Blachernite district, where established waste pits had been dug. As the tanning industry flourished, so too did the need for regulatory oversight. In 570 CE, a notable figure in the realm of Byzantine governance, Anthemos, the prefect of Constantinople, introduced a series of compliance measures aimed at enforcing the waste disposal regulations. Under his administration, inspectors known as syntoktai were appointed to monitor tanneries and ensure adherence to the established guidelines. These inspectors were often drawn from the ranks of the local aristocracy, thus ensuring a degree of authority and respect in their oversight roles. The architectural features of tanneries during this period were primarily functional, characterized by large open areas for soaking hides, drying spaces, and vats for the chemical processes involved in tanning. The waste produced in these operations was often a combination of animal remains, chemicals such as lime and alum, and water used in the tanning process. The presence of such waste posed significant health risks, prompting the need for stringent regulations. Administrative procedures regarding compliance audits were formalized by the mid-6th century. Each tannery was required to maintain a ledger, detailing daily waste disposal practices and volumes of waste generated. These ledgers were periodically reviewed by the syntoktai, who performed rigorous inspections of the tanneries. The inspections typically occurred quarterly, and the findings were documented in formal reports submitted to the prefect's office. Non-compliance resulted in penalties, including fines or the temporary suspension of tanning licenses. In 610 CE, Emperor Heraclius, in an effort to streamline the regulatory process, initiated a comprehensive review of existing waste management practices. This period marked the establishment of a central office, the Byzantine, which was charged with the oversight of all environmental regulations, including those related to tannery waste. The Byzantine operated from a modest structure located near the Augusta Ion Square in Constantinople, where officials would convene to discuss regulatory matters. Daily routines for tanners in this era were labor-intensive and dictated largely by the seasons. The tanning process itself could take several weeks, requiring constant oversight to manage the waste produced. Tanners typically began their day at dawn, first preparing the hides by soaking them in lime solutions to remove hair and impurities. This initial stage of processing generated significant waste, leading to the need for immediate disposal. Following the completion of the soaking process, the hides would be transferred to drying racks, where they were exposed to the elements. During this time, tanners would often engage in the collection of waste materials, which were then transported to designated disposal sites outside the city. The transportation of waste was typically conducted using carts pulled by oxen, a process that was both tedious and time-consuming. The introduction of additional regulations in the year 740 CE, during the reign of Emperor Leo III, further refined the compliance audit process. Leo III, recognizing the increasing urbanization and its associated challenges, mandated that all waste disposal sites be clearly marked and maintained. The markings, typically consisting of wooden posts painted with specific symbols denoting waste disposal, were intended to aid inspectors in identifying compliant locations. The inspections conducted by the Syntocti during the Leo III era became more extensive, incorporating not only visual inspections but also chemical tests to evaluate the composition of waste being disposed of. This development marked a significant evolution in the regulatory framework, as inspectors were now equipped with rudimentary testing kits to analyze the pH levels of waste, ensuring that harmful chemicals were not being dumped indiscriminately. Throughout the 9th and 10th centuries, the Byzantine Empire witnessed a series of administrative reforms that had a profound impact on waste management practices. The establishment of the Logothete of the Drome, an office responsible for the management of public works and urban planning, played a crucial role in the regulation of tanneries. In 867 CE, under the influence of Emperor Basil I, the Logothete began to emphasize the importance of sustainable practices, advocating for the recycling of tannery waste whenever feasible. As part of these reforms, a series of public seminars were held to educate tanners on best practices for waste management. Such seminars, often conducted in the grand halls of the Great Palace of Constantinople, provided tanners with information on the environmental impacts of their operations and practical advice on improving waste disposal methods. These educational efforts were considered groundbreaking, as they represented an early attempt at fostering a culture of compliance and environmental awareness within the tanning industry. By the late 11th century, the Byzantine Empire's economic landscape began to shift, thanks in part to the rise of trade with Western Europe and the increasing prominence of artisan guilds. This economic expansion necessitated further scrutiny of waste management practices, particularly as urban centers grew denser and the potential for pollution increased. In 1071 CE, the Council of Constantinople convened to address these issues, resulting in the issuance of the Edict on Tannery Waste, which established new guidelines for waste disposal. The edict mandated that all tanneries be equipped with designated waste treatment facilities, thereby reducing the burden on public waste sites. The architectural landscape of tanneries evolved in response to these new regulations. Tanneries constructed during this period often included rudimentary treatment facilities consisting of shallow pits lined with clay, where waste could be processed and neutralized before being transported for final disposal. This innovation represented a significant advancement in waste management practices, albeit one that was still rudimentary by modern standards. Inspections conducted during the 12th century became increasingly formalized, with the introduction of standardized inspection forms that documented compliance levels. The forms included sections for noting the condition of waste disposal sites, the volume of waste generated, and any corrective actions taken by tanners in response to previous violations. This bureaucratization of the compliance audit process reflected the Byzantine Empire's growing emphasis on order and regulation. In the year 1204 CE, the Fourth Crusade resulted in the temporary occupation of Constantinople by Western forces, leading to a significant disruption in the administrative processes governing waste management. The resultant chaos brought forth a period of lax enforcement, during which many tanners circumvented regulations due to the lack of oversight. Waste disposal practices deteriorated, leading to increased pollution within the city and a resurgence of public health concerns. The Byzantine response to the post-Crusade environmental crisis was marked by a renewed commitment to waste management regulation. In 1261 CE, the restoration of Byzantine rule prompted the reinstatement of the syntacti and the re-establishment of compliance audits, which were rigorously enforced. The return to centralized oversight allowed for the implementation of stricter penalties for non-compliance, including the revocation of tanning licenses and the imposition of heavy fines. By the 14th century, the administrative landscape of the Byzantine Empire had evolved significantly, with the establishment of comprehensive urban planning strategies that integrated waste management into broader public health initiatives. The regulations governing tannery waste were now part of a larger framework that included guidelines for the management of all industrial waste throughout the empire. This holistic approach marked a significant advancement in the governance of environmental issues, although challenges remained. The final decades of the Byzantine Empire, culminating in the fall of Constantinople in 1453, witnessed the continued evolution of waste management regulations. Despite the empire's decline, the foundational principles established during previous centuries persisted, influencing subsequent waste management practices in the regions that once formed part of the Byzantine domain. In conclusion, the history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits is characterized by a gradual evolution of practices, shaped by societal needs, environmental considerations, and administrative reforms. From the early regulations enacted during the reign of Justinian I to the more comprehensive frameworks established in the late Byzantine period, these regulations reflect a long-standing commitment to public health and urban sustainability. The meticulous nature of compliance audits, the architectural adaptations of tanneries, and the administrative procedures implemented over the centuries underscore the significance of waste management in Byzantine governance, albeit in a manner that remains largely overshadowed by other historical narratives. The construction methods and materials employed in the establishment of Byzantine imperial tanneries were dictated by both the technological limitations of the era and the prevailing environmental conditions. Most notably, the structures were typically constructed using locally sourced materials such as limestone, clay, and timber. The limestone, prevalent in regions such as Asia Minor, was quarried and transported to the sites, where it was utilized for foundational walls due to its durability and resistance to moisture, which was critical given the wet conditions associated with the tanning process. The roofs of these tanneries were often constructed using timber beams, which were occasionally reinforced with clay tiles. The selection of timber was particularly influenced by the availability of specific tree species, such as oak and pine, which were chosen for their strength and availability. These buildings typically exhibited a rectangular design, with dimensions averaging approximately 20 meters in length and 10 meters in width, providing an adequate space for both the tanning processes and the necessary waste management systems. In terms of maintenance procedures, the Byzantine authorities mandated regular inspections of the tanneries as part of their compliance audits. These audits, conducted at least biannually, focused on assessing the structural integrity of the buildings and the efficiency of waste disposal methods. Maintenance procedures included the cleaning of collection pits where tannery effluents were stored prior to treatment. Records indicate that it was common practice for workers to remove solid waste from these pits every 2 weeks, using wooden scoops and carts to transport the material to designated disposal sites, which were often located at least 100 meters away from the tannery to mitigate environmental contamination. Financial records from the era provide a detailed account of the costs associated with both the construction and maintenance of the tanneries. In the year 548 CE, the construction of a mid-sized tannery in Constantinople was recorded to cost approximately 500 solidi, a substantial sum reflecting the quality of materials used and the labor required. The financial records also indicate that annual maintenance, including the costs of labor, materials, and waste removal, averaged around 150 solidi per tannery. This figure highlights the significant economic burden that waste management placed on the Byzantine imperial treasury. Personnel involved in the operations of these tanneries were categorized into distinct job roles, each with specific responsibilities outlined in various imperial decrees. The primary labor force consisted of tanners, who were skilled artisans responsible for transforming raw hides into leather. Their duties included soaking hides in vats of lime and water, scraping off flesh, and applying tanning agents such as oak bark. Tanners typically worked in shifts, with each shift lasting approximately 8 hours, and a single tannery could employ anywhere from 5 to 15 tanners at a given time. In addition to the tanners, there were also workers designated as waste handlers, whose primary responsibility was the management of effluent and solid waste generated by the tanning process. These personnel were often tasked with maintaining the hygiene of the collection pits and ensuring that waste was disposed of in accordance with the Byzantine regulations. The role of the waste handler was considered essential, and individuals in this position received specialized training on the handling of hazardous materials, particularly the caustic substances used in tanning. Technical specifications governing the operations of Byzantine tanneries were codified in various legal documents, most notably the Edict of 535 CE issued by Emperor Justinian I, which established standards for waste management practices. The edict outlined specific measurements for waste collection pits, mandating a minimum depth of 2 meters and a width of 1.5 meters to ensure adequate storage of effluents. Furthermore, the edict prescribed that these pits be lined with clay to prevent seepage into the surrounding soil, a requirement that underscored the Byzantine commitment to environmental management. The treatment of waste was also addressed in the edict, which stipulated that all solid waste must be removed from the collection pits at least once every fortnight. Failure to comply with this regulation resulted in penalties, which could include fines or a temporary suspension of operations. The edict also introduced a system of weights and measures for the quantities of waste produced, with specific thresholds established to trigger additional oversight. For instance, tanneries producing more than 500 kilograms of waste per month were required to submit detailed reports to local authorities documenting their waste management practices. Additionally, the imperial administration maintained meticulous records of compliance audits, which were conducted by appointed inspectors known as anagnostai. These inspectors were responsible for ensuring that the tanneries adhered to the established regulations and that waste disposal methods were properly implemented. The audits typically included a thorough examination of the waste collection pits, the condition of the tanning vats, and the overall cleanliness of the facility. Records from the period suggest that non-compliance could lead to a series of escalating penalties, beginning with a warning and potentially culminating in the permanent closure of the facility. The Byzantine approach to waste management in tanneries reflected broader societal values, emphasizing the importance of public health and environmental stewardship. The regulations not only aimed to mitigate the impact of tannery waste on the local ecosystem but also sought to maintain the overall reputation of the Byzantine Empire as a center of commerce and craftsmanship. By enforcing stringent waste management practices, the Byzantine authorities endeavored to ensure that the leather produced within their borders met the high standards expected by both domestic and international markets. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits encapsulate a complex interplay of construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial considerations, personnel roles, and technical specifications. The historical significance of these practices, while often overshadowed by more prominent events of the era, provides a unique lens through which to understand the governance and economic priorities of the Byzantine Empire. The meticulous documentation and adherence to regulations demonstrate a commitment to sustainable practices that resonate with contemporary environmental concerns, thus underscoring the enduring relevance of Byzantine waste management strategies. The construction methods and materials employed in the establishment of Byzantine imperial tanneries were dictated by both the technological limitations of the era and the prevailing environmental conditions. Most notably, the structures were typically constructed using locally sourced materials such as limestone, clay, and timber. The limestone, prevalent in regions such as Asia Minor, was quarried and transported to the sites, where it was utilized for foundational walls due to its durability and resistance to weathering. For example, the limestone sourced from quarries near Ephesus was favored for its quality, allowing tanneries to withstand the harsh conditions associated with the tanning process. Estimates suggest that the Byzantine Empire had established significant tanneries by the 6th century AD, particularly in urban centers like Constantinople and Antioch. These tanneries were strategically located near waterways to facilitate the tanning process, which required substantial amounts of water for soaking hides and cleaning. The availability of water from the Bosphorus Strait in Constantinople allowed for the establishment of large-scale tanneries, some of which were documented in the Notitia Dignitatum, a late Roman administrative document from the early 5th century. The construction of these tanneries was a meticulous process that involved specific architectural designs to ensure efficiency and safety. Buildings were typically rectangular or L-shaped, constructed with thick walls to accommodate large vats for soaking and tanning hides. The roofs were often sloped to allow for the drainage of rainwater, which minimized water accumulation that could lead to structural damage. Additionally, ventilation was crucial, given the noxious fumes associated with the tanning process. Windows and openings were strategically placed to allow airflow, essential for maintaining a suitable working environment. The tanning process itself was complex and varied depending on the type of leather being produced. For instance, the production of high-quality lambskin leather involved soaking the hides in a solution of lime and water for several days to loosen hair and fat. This was followed by a rigorous washing process in clean water to remove any residual lime. In contrast, goat leather, which was more common and less expensive, required a different approach, often utilizing tannins from local plants like oak and sumac. A notable example of a Byzantine tannery was the one located in the suburb of Blacherny in Constantinople, which operated during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565 AD. This tannery was reported to employ over 200 workers and was capable of processing large volumes of hides from sheep, goats, and cattle. Historical records indicate that the tannery produced leather not only for local consumption but also for export, underscoring the economic significance of this industry. In terms of measurements, the vats used in these tanneries could range from 2 to 3 meters in length and 1 meter in width, with a depth of approximately 1.5 meters. These large containers were often lined with stone or wood to prevent leakage and ensure durability. The tanning solutions were carefully monitored, with workers employing specific ratios of water to tannins based on the type of leather being produced. Historical texts suggest that the concentration of tannins could vary between 10 to 20%, depending on the desired quality of the final product. Additional historical context reveals that leather production was not only an economic activity but also a culturally significant one. The Byzantine Empire placed a high value on leather goods, which were used in clothing, armor, bookbinding, and various other applications. The prominence of leatherwork is evidenced by the intricate designs found on Byzantine garments, which often featured leather embellishments, and the leather-bound manuscripts that have survived from this era. Furthermore, the Byzantine legal system, particularly the Novelli of Justinian, included regulations concerning the tanning industry, addressing issues such as pricing, labor conditions, and environmental impacts. This reflects the empire's recognition of the importance of sustainable practices in artisan industries, as excessive waste from tanneries could lead to pollution of local water sources. In summary, the Byzantine imperial tanneries were a product of their time, shaped by available materials, technological capabilities, and cultural demands. The architectural choices, processes, and legal frameworks surrounding these establishments illuminate the complexity and significance of leather production in Byzantine society. By the late 11th century, as trade routes expanded and demand for leather goods grew, these tanneries evolved further, incorporating innovations that would later influence European tanning techniques in the Middle Ages. The legacy of these Byzantine tanneries is evident not only in the artifacts that survive today but also in the enduring craftsmanship of leather goods that continues to be valued across cultures. The construction methods employed in the establishment of Byzantine tanneries were dictated by both the technological limitations of the time and the specific environmental conditions present in the regions where these facilities were located. Typically, These tanneries were constructed using locally sourced materials, which included stone, clay, and timber, all of which were readily available within the empire's expansive borders. The walls of the tanneries were often made from limestone or brick, as these materials provided the necessary structural integrity to withstand the heavy loads associated with tanning processes. The roofs were commonly constructed from timber beams, covered with reed thatch or tile to provide protection from the elements. The layout of a typical tannery was functional, with separate sections designated for the various stages of the tanning process. In terms of measurements, a standard tannery could measure approximately 20 meters in length and 10 meters in width, allowing for a significant number of hides to be processed simultaneously. The interior was divided into areas for soaking, liming, and tanning, with each area equipped with large vats made of wood or stone, which could hold several hundred liters of liquid. The use of large vats was essential, as the tanning process required the immersion of animal hides in various solutions for extended periods, often ranging from several hours to several days, depending on the desired outcome. Maintenance procedures for these tanneries were essential to ensure compliance with the regulations set forth by the Byzantine authorities. Regular inspections of the facilities were mandated, typically occurring on a quarterly basis. During these inspections, the structural integrity of the buildings was assessed, along with the condition of the tanning vats and drainage systems. Maintenance tasks included the cleaning of vats to remove residual waste products, repair of any leaks in the drainage systems, and reinforcement of the roofing structures to prevent water ingress. The financial records associated with the operation of tanneries were meticulously kept, as they were vital for both taxation purposes and the assessment of profitability. Tanners were required to maintain detailed accounts of their expenditures and revenues, documenting all costs associated with raw materials, labor, and maintenance. An example of such a financial record from the year 908 AD shows that the average cost of a single cowhide was approximately 10 solidi, while the associated expenses for labor could range from 2 to 3 solidi per day for skilled workers. Moreover, the costs for the various chemicals used in the tanning process, such as lime and oak bark, were also recorded. For instance, in 964 AD, the price of lime was documented to be 1 solidus per 100 kilograms, while bark was approximately 3 solidi for 100 kilograms. This meticulous documentation allowed for a clearer understanding of the profitability margins and led to the establishment of more efficient practices within the industry. In terms of personnel, the job descriptions within the tanneries were highly specialized. The primary role was that of the tanner, who was responsible for overseeing the entire tanning process from the initial soaking of hides to the final finishing stages. Tanner apprentices, often starting at a young age, undertook a rigorous training regimen that lasted several years, where they learned the intricacies of the trade. Other personnel included the limers, who handled the liming process, which involved the removal of hair from hides. This role was particularly demanding due to the caustic nature of the lime, which required workers to wear protective clothing made from coarse linen to prevent skin irritation. Additionally, there were laborers who were primarily tasked with transporting hides to and from the tannery, a role that required significant physical strength and endurance. The technical specifications of the tanning process were well documented in various Byzantine texts, some of which have survived to this day. The primary methods included vegetable tanning, which utilized tannins extracted from plant materials, and mineral tanning, which involved the use of salts, such as alum. The specifications dictated that hides must first be soaked in water for a period of 24 hours to rehydrate them adequately. Following this, they were placed in a lime solution for another 24 hours to facilitate hair removal. Once the hair was removed, the hides were rinsed and transferred to vats containing a tanning solution. The technical documentation specifies that the tanning solution should have a pH level of approximately 4 to 5, which is optimal for the preservation of the hide. The duration of this immersion varied based on the thickness of the hide, with thinner hides requiring about 2 weeks in the tanning solution, while thicker hides could take upwards of a month. The compliance audits conducted by Byzantine officials were rigorous, focusing on adherence to environmental regulations regarding waste management. Tanneries were required to construct efficient drainage systems to manage the significant volumes of wastewater produced during the tanning process. Auditors would often measure the flow rates of these drainage systems, ensuring that they were capable of handling at least 500 liters of effluent per hour without backing up into the facility. The waste produced from the tanning process was primarily organic and chemical in nature, necessitating the implementation of specific waste management strategies. Tanneries were obligated to maintain waste disposal sites at least 50 meters from any water source to prevent contamination. Inspections would assess the condition of these waste sites, ensuring they were adequately covered and not attracting vermin, which could pose health risks to nearby populations. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery system operated under a complex framework of regulations, compliance audits, and meticulously documented procedures. The construction methods and materials reflected the practical needs of the tanning process, while maintenance procedures ensured that these facilities remained operational and compliant with the law. Detailed financial records provided insights into the economic viability of the tanning trade, while clearly defined personnel roles contributed to the efficiency of operations. Finally, the stringent technical specifications and waste management requirements underscored the Byzantine commitment to regulating this important industry, which played a crucial role in the empire's economy and culture. The construction methods employed in the establishment of Byzantine tanneries were dictated by both the technological limitations of the time and the specific environmental conditions present in the regions where these facilities were located. Typically, these tanneries were constructed using locally sourced materials, which included stone, clay, and timber, all of which were readily available within the empire's expansive borders. The walls of the tanneries were often made from limestone or brick, which provided durability and insulation against the elements. The use of limestone, particularly in regions like Asia Minor and the Balkans, was prevalent due to its abundance and the thermal properties that helped regulate the temperatures within the tannery. For instance, the city of Ephesus, renowned for its tanneries in the 5th century AD, utilized local limestone to construct facilities that were both functional and long-lasting. The layout of a typical Byzantine tannery was often designed for efficiency and ease of use, with specific areas designated for different stages of the tanning process. A common design included a series of interconnected vats where hides would be soaked, limed, and tanned. These vats were usually carved from stone and lined with clay to prevent leaks and contamination. The process began with the soaking of hides in water, often for several days, to remove any residual flesh and blood. After this initial soaking, the hides would be limed, a process typically involving the use of slaked lime, which helped to break down the hair follicles and prepare the skin for tanning. A significant innovation in Byzantine tanning was the use of oak bark, which was rich in tannins, a critical component in the tanning process. This method was prevalent in the regions surrounding the Aegean Sea, where oak trees were abundant. Tanners would gather the bark, dry it, and grind it into a powder, which would then be mixed with water to create a tanning solution. The hides were submerged in this solution for weeks, sometimes months, depending on the desired quality and type of leather. The final product, known as cordovan, was highly prized and often exported across the Mediterranean, particularly to markets in Italy and North Africa. The historical context of Byzantine tanneries also sheds light on the socio-economic dynamics of the empire. By the 6th century, the Byzantine Empire was a hub of trade, and leather goods were a crucial commodity. The tanneries not only supplied local markets but also contributed to the empire's trade networks, exporting leather goods like shoes, belts, and armor. For example, the famed leather shields used by Byzantine soldiers were crafted from high-quality tanned hides, which were essential for protection in warfare. The craftsmanship involved in creating these leather goods was highly regarded, and tanners often held a significant status in their communities. Moreover, the tannery's location was strategically chosen, often near bodies of water, to facilitate the easy transportation of hides and the disposal of waste. The riverbanks of the Bosphorus, for instance, provided an ideal setting for tanneries, combining access to water with a bustling trade route. The waste produced during tanning, however, posed environmental challenges, leading to regulations that sought to mitigate pollution and protect local water sources. By the 10th century, municipal authorities began implementing laws to control waste disposal from tanneries, reflecting an evolving understanding of environmental impacts. In addition to oak bark, the Byzantine tanning process also incorporated various local herbs and plants, which were believed to enhance the quality and durability of the leather. For instance, the use of sumac and myrtle was common in some regions, adding unique properties to the leather produced. These natural additives were often region-specific. In the Levant, for example, tanners would utilize the abundant sumac plant due to its high tannin content, which contributed to the distinct color and texture of the leather. The architectural style of Byzantine tanneries also reflected the broader artistic and cultural trends of the empire. Many tanneries featured decorative elements, such as mosaics and frescoes, that illustrated scenes of the tanning process or depicted mythological motifs related to craftsmanship and trade. These artistic touches were not only a reflection of the artisan's skills but also served to elevate the status of the tanneries within the local community. In summary, the construction and operation of Byzantine tanneries were complex processes influenced by environmental resources, local materials, and cultural practices. Their significance extended beyond mere production facilities. They were pivotal in the socio-economic framework of the Byzantine Empire, contributing to trade, craftsmanship, and even environmental management practices that evolved over the centuries. The construction methods and materials used in Byzantine imperial tanneries were characterized by their practical yet unadorned approach, reflecting both the utilitarian nature of the industry and the available resources of the time. Initial construction of these facilities often began around the 4th century AD, coinciding with the empire's expanding economic and military needs. The tanneries were typically constructed near water sources, such as rivers or streams, to facilitate the essential processes of soaking and washing hides. The primary building materials utilized included locally sourced stone, clay, and timber. Stone was favored for its durability, especially in the foundations and lower walls, while clay was often used for the construction of kilns and drying rooms, due to its heat-retaining properties. Timber, particularly from nearby forests, was employed for roofing structures, which were often gabled to allow for efficient drainage and ventilation. Byzantine architects employed a standardized dimension for timber beams, measuring approximately 6 to 8 inches in thickness and spanning up to 12 feet in length, which allowed for easy transportation and assembly. As the tanneries operated continuously, the maintenance procedures were meticulously documented. Regular inspections were mandated, occurring on a quarterly basis, with records maintained by a designated overseer. This individual was responsible for ensuring that all facilities adhered to the stipulated regulations set forth by the imperial edicts. Maintenance activities included the repair of leaky roofs, reinforcement of wall structures, and the regular clearing of waste from collection pits. This waste, primarily consisting of decomposed organic matter, was to be removed at least once every month to prevent contamination of water sources and to mitigate odor. Financial records and costs associated with the operation of imperial tanneries were elaborately maintained, reflecting the complex economic structure of the Byzantine Empire. The typical financial ledger for a tannery would begin with the initial construction costs, which could vary significantly based on the size and location of the facility. For instance, a medium-sized tannery established in the 6th century might have an initial investment of approximately 200 solidi, a significant sum at the time. This investment covered materials, labor, and initial equipment, such as vats and drying racks. Ongoing operational costs included labor, which was often the most substantial expenditure. The wages for a tanner could range from 4 to 6 denarii per day, depending on their skill level and the complexity of the work. Additionally, the cost of procurement for hides fluctuated, with prices averaging around 12 denarii per hide in the 7th century, influenced by both local supply and demand. Records indicate that in 668 AD, a significant spike in hide costs was noted, attributed to increased military campaigns requiring leather for armor and equipment. Personnel and job descriptions within the tanneries were strictly defined, with various roles contributing to the overall operation. The head tanner, or tannator, was responsible for overseeing all processes, from hide procurement to final product quality control. This position required extensive knowledge of tanning techniques and environmental regulations. Assisting the head tanner were several journeymen, typically numbering between 2 to 4 per facility, tasked with the actual tanning of hides. Their duties included the preparation of tanning solutions, monitoring the soaking process, and ensuring the proper application of oils and dyes. Laborers also played a crucial role, often comprising a workforce of unskilled or semi-skilled individuals. Their responsibilities included gathering raw hides, transporting materials, and maintaining cleanliness in the work areas. In larger facilities, specialized roles emerged, such as the dye master, who focused exclusively on the coloration processes post-tanning. This individual was required to maintain precise measurements of dye solutions, often mixing natural dyes derived from local plant sources, with ratios carefully recorded in a dedicated ledger. Technical specifications for the tanning process evolved considerably over the centuries, reflecting advancements in both techniques and regulatory compliance. The basic tanning process remained consistent, however, the introduction of new materials and methods, such as the use of alum beginning in the 8th century, significantly improved the quality of the leather produced. The imperial regulatory body mandated that all tanneries utilize a standardized alum solution consisting of 10% alum, 5% salt, and 85% water, measured in standardized vats that held approximately 500 liters. During the 9th century, the specifications for waste management became increasingly stringent. Tanneries were required to construct settling ponds, often measuring no less than 20 meters in length and 10 meters in width, to allow for the natural decomposition of waste materials prior to discharge into local waterways. The placement of these ponds was meticulously planned, with a minimum distance of 50 meters from any water source, as stipulated by the edicts of Emperor Michael III in 867 AD. Waste management audits were conducted biannually, with inspectors examining the physical layout of the tannery and ensuring compliance with waste disposal regulations. Reports indicated that in many cases, tanneries that failed to meet these standards faced fines ranging from 10 to 50 solidi, depending on the severity of the infraction. The inspectors, often trained artisans themselves, would assess not only the conditions of the settling ponds but also the overall cleanliness of the facility, including the maintenance of workspaces and equipment. The compliance audits extended beyond mere waste management, encompassing the evaluation of labor practices. Regulations mandated that all workers be registered and their roles documented, with discrepancies leading to further fines or the temporary suspension of operations. For example, in 912 AD, a tannery in Constantinople was temporarily closed due to the discovery of unregistered laborers, illustrating the rigid enforcement of compliance measures. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits provide a comprehensive overview of the intricate and often mundane aspects of an industry that was vital to the empire's economy. The construction, maintenance, financial management, personnel structure, and technical specifications reflect a society deeply engaged in the practicalities of trade and environmental stewardship. These tanneries, while perceived as tedious in their operations, were essential to the socio-economic fabric of the Byzantine Empire, illustrating the complexities of industry and regulation in a historical context that, while often overlooked, played a pivotal role in shaping the empire's legacy. The construction methods and materials used in Byzantine imperial tanneries were characterized by their practical yet unadorned approach, reflecting both the utilitarian nature of the industry and the available resources of the time. Initial construction of these facilities often began around the 4th century AD, coinciding with the empire's expanding economic and military needs. The tanneries were typically constructed near water sources, such as rivers or streams, to facilitate the essential processes involved in leather production. Byzantine tanneries were strategically located near significant waterways like the Bosporus and the Nile, which provided not only water for the tanning process but also transportation routes for raw materials and finished products. In Constantinople, where the concentration of resources was high, tanneries flourished along the shores of the Golden Horn, with records indicating that by the 6th century AD, the city housed over 60 such establishments. These locations were advantageous for both the accessibility of water and the ease of trade, allowing tanners to source animal hides from various regions of the empire, including North Africa and the Balkans. Construction techniques varied depending on the scale and resources of the tanneries. Small-scale tanneries might have been simple structures made from local stone or wood, with thatched roofs. Larger imperial tanneries, such as the ones established by Emperor Justinian I around 527 to 565 AD, often featured more robust construction, using brick and mortar to create a durable environment suitable for the processing of large quantities of hides. These larger facilities would often include multiple work areas, each designated for different stages of the tanning process, such as soaking, liming, and drying. The tanning process itself was remarkably labor-intensive and involved several distinct stages. Initially, animal skins were soaked in water to clean and soften them, a process that could take several days. Following this, the skins were treated with lime, which helped to remove hair and flesh, making the hides more pliable. After liming, the hides were rinsed and treated with tannins, typically derived from tree bark or other plant materials. This critical step not only preserved the hides but also imparted strength and flexibility. The tanners at Byzantine tanneries would often use a variety of local plant sources for tannins, including oak and chestnut, which were abundant in the Mediterranean region. An important example of the Byzantine tanning process can be seen in the remains of the tanneries discovered in the ancient city of Ephesus, where archaeologists have documented features such as large soaking pits and drying areas. Excavations indicate that these tanneries operated from the 6th to the 8th centuries AD, showcasing the continuity of this vital industry. The remains of tools, such as knives and scraping implements, provide further insight into the specific techniques employed by Byzantine tanners. In terms of measurements and specifications, the tanning pits in these ancient tanneries often measured around 2 to 3 meters in depth and 1 to 2 meters in width, allowing sufficient space for multiple hides to be submerged simultaneously. Workers would rotate hides in and out of the pits to ensure even tanning, a process that required both skill and significant manpower. The historical context of Byzantine tanneries also reflects broader economic trends within the empire. As the demand for leather goods increased, ranging from military armor to everyday footwear, so too did the complexity of the tanning operations. The establishment of guilds and regulations governing the tanning trade began to emerge during the 7th century, ensuring quality control and fair practices among tanners. This was particularly important given the growing competition among various regions producing leather goods within the empire. Additionally, the Byzantine Empire's emphasis on the quality of leather products is evident in the luxurious items produced for the elite classes. Fine leather was often dyed using natural pigments and embellished with intricate designs, indicating a blend of utility and artistry. The imperial court would often commission tanners to create specialized items, further solidifying the importance of this industry in the fabric of Byzantine society. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tanneries were significant not only for their practical contributions to the economy but also for their reflection of the cultural and technological advancements of the time. The combination of strategic location, robust construction methods, and an intricate understanding of the tanning process underpinned the success of these facilities and their lasting impact on the empire's material culture. As such, they serve as a testament to the ingenuity and adaptability of Byzantine craftsmanship. The construction methods employed in Byzantine tanneries during the 6th to 12th centuries were characterized by a practical approach that maximized efficiency while adhering to the prevailing architectural standards of the time. These facilities were typically built using locally sourced materials, primarily stone and timber, which were selected for their durability and availability. The foundational elements of a tannery were often composed of limestone, which was abundant in regions such as Thrace and Asia Minor, while the superstructure frequently utilized oak and fir due to their strength and resistance to decay. The layout of a typical Byzantine tannery was dictated by the functional requirements of the tanning process. Tanneries were typically rectangular, measuring approximately 20 to 30 meters in length and 10 to 15 meters in width, allowing for a series of interconnected workspaces. The interior was divided into distinct zones, each designated for specific tasks such as soaking, liming, and drying. The soaking area, often lined with stone basins measuring about 2 meters in depth, was strategically located to facilitate the easy flow of water, which was essential for the initial stages of the tanning process. To ensure the durability of these structures, roofs were constructed with sloping designs to facilitate rainwater drainage, using wooden beams and tiles made of fired clay, which were standard in Byzantine architecture. The eaves were generally extended to prevent water from running down the walls, thereby prolonging the integrity of the masonry. Walls were often plastered with a mixture of lime and sand to protect against moisture and to increase the thermal regulation of the interior space. Maintenance procedures in Byzantine tanneries were systematic and essential for the longevity of the facilities. Regular inspections were mandated to assess the integrity of the structures, particularly for signs of water damage or pest infestations, which were common due to the organic materials involved in the tanning process. Records indicate that maintenance schedules were established, with comprehensive checks occurring biannually, typically in spring and autumn. These inspections involved the examination of roof tiles, wall plaster, and the condition of the wooden beams, with any necessary repairs being documented in the tannery's maintenance log. The maintenance workforce consisted of specialized personnel, including masons, carpenters, and laborers, who were tasked with the upkeep of the facilities. Masons were responsible for repairing stonework, while carpenters focused on wooden structures and roofing. Laborers, often hired on a temporary basis, assisted with general cleaning and minor repairs. For instance, in the year 874, a notable audit revealed that the labor costs associated with maintenance accounted for approximately 15% of the total operational expenses of a medium-sized tannery. Financial records from Byzantine tanneries illustrate the economic implications of operating such facilities. The overall financial management of a tannery involved meticulous record keeping, including detailed accounts of expenditures and revenues. Over the years, these records highlight significant fluctuations in operating costs, largely attributed to the prices of raw materials and labor. In 1025, for example, the cost of hides increased by roughly 20% due to trade disruptions, prompting many tanneries to adjust their pricing strategies accordingly. Cost analysis revealed that the procurement of hides constituted the largest expense, often exceeding 50% of the total operational budget. Secondary expenses included labor costs, which averaged around 30% of the budget, and utility costs, primarily water and firewood, which comprised the remaining 20%. Tanneries were also required to invest in compliance with waste management regulations, which included fines for non-compliance. In the year 1034, a specific tannery was fined 100 solidi for failing to adequately manage its effluent, highlighting the financial risks associated with non-compliance. Personnel involved in the operation of Byzantine tanneries were categorized into various roles, each with specific job descriptions that delineated responsibilities and expectations. The primary role was that of the master tanner, who oversaw the entire tanning process, from the procurement of hides to the final product. The master tanner was typically an individual with several years of experience in the craft, often apprenticed under another master, and was responsible for ensuring the quality of the finished leather. Below the master tanner were skilled laborers known as tanners, who executed the tanning process under the supervision of the master. These tanners were adept in the use of various chemicals, such as lime and tannin, and were responsible for maintaining the integrity of the hides throughout the tanning process. Other specialized roles included the soaker, who managed the soaking and liming stages, and the finisher, who prepared the leather for sale by trimming and dyeing. In addition to these roles, tanneries also employed a small number of administrative staff tasked with record-keeping and compliance audits. This included the role of the accountant, who documented daily financial transactions, and the compliance officer, responsible for ensuring adherence to waste management regulations. The compliance officer conducted regular audits of waste disposal practices, often reporting directly to local authorities to maintain compliance with imperial regulations. The technical specifications of Byzantine tanning processes were defined by a combination of traditional methodologies and evolving techniques. The primary tanning agent used during this period was tannin, derived primarily from tree bark, which was known for its efficacy in preserving animal hides. The use of vegetable tannins became increasingly popular, particularly from sources such as oak and chestnut, which were abundant in the Byzantine Empire. The tanning process typically commenced with the soaking of hides in water for a period of 3 to 5 days, depending on the thickness of the hide. Following soaking, the hides were treated with a lime solution, which facilitated hair removal and opened the pores of the skin. This stage lasted from 1 to 2 weeks, after which the hides were thoroughly rinsed to remove any residual lime. Once prepared, the hides underwent the tanning phase, which involved immersion in a solution of tannin-rich liquid. The duration of this process varied significantly, ranging from several weeks to several months, contingent upon the type of leather being produced. For instance, high-quality leather intended for bookbinding or armor might require an extended tanning period of up to 6 months, whereas lesser grades of leather for common use could be completed in as little as 1 month. Upon completion of the tanning process, the hides were dried and stretched to prevent warping, a procedure that was meticulously performed to ensure uniformity and quality. The drying area was typically equipped with wooden frames and screens, allowing for proper air circulation. Measurements of the dried leather were standardized, with common dimensions being approximately 1.5 meters in length and 1 meter in width, although larger and smaller sizes were also produced based on specific customer needs. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits not only mandated the efficient management of waste but also shaped the operational practices, financial structures, and personnel roles within tanneries. The detailed construction methods, maintenance procedures, financial records, personnel job descriptions, and technical specifications reflected a complex interplay of craftsmanship, economic management, and regulatory compliance, which collectively contributed to the enduring legacy of Byzantine leather production. The tedious history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits has, thus far, explored the intricate web of rules, practices, and societal perceptions that surrounded the leather tanning industry in the Byzantine Empire. In the following sections, we shall delve into the regional variations and comparisons of waste management practices, the evolution of these regulations over various time periods, the bureaucratic nature of laws governing the industry, the complexities of supply chain and logistics involved in waste disposal, and the meticulous methods of record-keeping employed by the Byzantine officials. #Regional variations and comparisons. The Byzantine Empire, stretching from the eastern Mediterranean to parts of the Balkans and North Africa, exhibited significant regional variations in its tanning practices and subsequent waste management. These differences arose from localized environmental conditions, urbanization levels, and even cultural attitudes toward leather production and waste disposal. In the coastal cities such as Constantinople and Thessalonica, the proximity to water bodies enabled a unique approach to waste management. Tanners in these regions often utilized the natural flow of rivers to dilute and carry away the noxious effluents resulting from the tanning process. The treatment of waste in these urban centers was thus characterized by a reliance on natural waterways, which were both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, the rivers provided an avenue for waste removal; on the other, the pollution of water sources became a growing concern for public health and environmental sustainability. Conversely, in more rural areas, particularly in regions like Anatolia or parts of the Balkans, tanners employed different methods due to the relative scarcity of water bodies. Instead, they often resorted to landfilling methods, creating designated pits for the disposal of solid waste, including hair, flesh, and other byproducts. These pits would often be covered with soil to mitigate odors and reduce surface runoff, a practice that, while rudimentary, reflects an early understanding of waste containment. Additionally, variations in local governance also influenced regional practices. In regions with a more centralized authority, such as Constantinople, strict compliance audits were instituted, resulting in a systematic approach to waste management. In contrast, more remote provinces could exhibit a lax adherence to regulations, with local tanners often operating in a manner dictated by tradition rather than imperial edict. #evolution over different time periods. The evolution of waste management regulations in the Byzantine Empire can be traced through several distinct phases, each reflecting broader societal shifts, technological advances, and changing imperial priorities. During the early Byzantine period, circa 330 to 600 CE, the focus on waste management was minimal. Leather production was largely a cottage industry, with tanners operating on a small scale and often within the confines of their homes. Consequently, waste disposal was primarily an informal affair, reliant on local customs rather than any codified regulations. It was during this time that the first rudimentary references to waste disposal in legal texts began to emerge, indicating a nascent recognition of the need for oversight. By the Middle Byzantine period, circa 600–1200 CE, as urbanization increased and the demand for leather goods surged, so too did the volume of waste produced. It was at this juncture that the imperial bureaucracy began to formalize waste management practices. The establishment of the Codex Justinianus in the 6th century included provisions addressing the disposal of tannery waste, emphasizing the need for tanners to maintain cleanliness and public health. The Codex stipulated specific distances that tanneries had to be set from residential areas and waterways, reflecting an early administrative effort to mitigate the environmental impact of tanning operations. The late Byzantine period, circa 1200 to 1453 CE, saw further refinement of these regulations, influenced by both internal and external pressures. The rise of the Ottoman Empire and the subsequent competition for trade necessitated a more sophisticated approach to waste management. The Byzantine authorities instituted compliance audits, compelling tanners to maintain detailed records of their waste disposal practices. This period also witnessed the introduction of more stringent penalties for non-compliance, including fines and, in severe cases, the revocation of a tanner's license to operate. #Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine approach to regulating tannery waste was characterized by an extensive bureaucratic framework that sought to control every aspect of the tanning process, from the acquisition of raw hides to the disposal of waste. This system was underpinned by a series of laws that delineated the responsibilities of tanners and the consequences of failure to comply. One of the most notable regulatory bodies was the dikastes, or judge, who was tasked with overseeing compliance in various trades, including tanning. Tanners were required to submit to regular inspections, during which officials would examine their facilities for adherence to waste management regulations. These inspections were not merely cursory. They involved a thorough investigation of waste disposal methods, cleanliness standards, and even the treatment of residual chemicals used in tanning. The Byzantine legal code also addressed the responsibilities of local municipalities in managing waste. Cities were required to develop infrastructure for waste removal, including designated dumping sites and the employment of laborers tasked with the collection and transport of tannery waste. Failure to establish such systems could result in legal consequences for city officials, creating a layered accountability that extended from the tanner to the municipal government. One particularly interesting aspect of these regulations was the classification of waste. Tannery waste was divided into categories based on its nature: liquid effluents, solid byproducts, and hazardous materials, and each category was subject to different disposal methods. For instance, while liquid waste could sometimes be channeled into sewers, solid waste required specific disposal techniques, often involving burial or incineration. The complexity of these regulations reflects a growing awareness of the environmental impact of industrial practices and the necessity of a structured response. ### Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of waste management in Byzantine tanneries were equally complex, involving a network of suppliers, laborers, and regulatory bodies. The tanning process itself was resource-intensive, requiring not only raw hides but also various chemicals, such as tannins derived from tree bark, which were essential in the preservation and treatment of leather. The sourcing of these materials necessitated a well-organized supply chain, which was often affected by the availability of local resources. Once the tanning process was complete, the resulting waste had to be transported to designated disposal sites. This required a coordinated effort involving laborers who were responsible for collecting and carting waste away from the tanneries. Given the volume of waste generated, particularly during peak production seasons, efficient logistics were crucial. Tanners often worked with local cart drivers and labor unions to ensure timely removal of waste, a practice that underscores the interdependence of various trades within the Byzantine economy. The transportation of waste was also influenced by municipal regulations that dictated specific routes to be taken for waste disposal, often to minimize the impact on residential areas. These routes were often well marked, and laborers were trained to follow them meticulously to avoid penalties. The logistics of waste management thus extended beyond mere disposal, encompassing a broader network of social and economic interactions that were vital to the functioning of Byzantine urban centers. ### Record-keeping methods. In the Byzantine Empire, record-keeping served as a cornerstone of effective waste management. The meticulous documentation of waste disposal practices allowed imperial officials to monitor compliance and enforce regulations. Tanners were often required to maintain logs detailing the type and quantity of waste produced, the methods of disposal employed, and the frequency of waste removal. These records took various forms, from simple ledgers maintained within the tanneries to more elaborate scrolls submitted to local authorities. Scribes played a critical role in this process, often employed by tanners to ensure that records were accurately maintained and submitted in a timely manner. The system of record-keeping was so rigorous that it also included annotations regarding inspections and any penalties incurred for non-compliance, creating a comprehensive historical account of each tanner's practices over time. Moreover, records were often cross-referenced with municipal logs, providing a multifaceted view of waste management practices within a given locality. Such practices reflect the Byzantine emphasis on accountability and transparency, illustrating a bureaucratic culture that valued detailed record-keeping not merely for regulatory compliance, but as a means of preserving the integrity of the leather industry. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits encapsulate a complex interplay of regional practices, evolving legal frameworks, logistical challenges, and rigorous record-keeping methods. Each of these elements contributed to a broader understanding of industrial practices in a historical context, revealing the intricate ways in which society navigated the challenges posed by waste management long before modern environmental concerns took center stage. The Byzantine Empire, with its rich tapestry of regulations, provides a remarkable case study in the evolution of industrial waste management, serving as a reminder of the enduring relevance of these issues throughout history. The Tedious History of Byzantine Imperial Tannery Waste Management Regulations and Compliance Audits, Part 7. The Byzantine Empire, with its sprawling territories and diverse cultures, inevitably led to regional variations in the management of tannery waste. These differences were not merely a reflection of local customs or practices, rather, they were intricately tied to the unique economic, environmental, and social conditions prevalent in each area. The empire's extensive geography, ranging from the lush valleys of Anatolia to the arid landscapes of Syria, influenced the approaches to waste management adopted by local tanners. Regional variations and comparisons. In the coastal regions of Byzantium, such as those bordering the Aegean Sea, the proximity to water sources facilitated the disposal of tanning effluents. Tanners in these areas often utilized the natural flow of rivers to carry away waste, leading to a more relaxed regulatory environment. The coastal towns, where fishery and maritime trade were crucial, adopted a somewhat lenient approach to waste management, as the immediate economic benefits of leather production outweighed the ecological concerns. Conversely, in the inland regions, where water was scarce, stringent regulations were enforced to manage the waste produced by tanneries. The arid landscapes of Mesopotamia, for instance, prompted local authorities to develop comprehensive waste reduction strategies. Tanners were mandated to construct elaborate filtration systems to treat their waste before disposal. The comparison between these regions highlights the adaptive strategies employed by local authorities, shaped by environmental constraints and economic imperatives. Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of waste management regulations within Byzantine tanneries can be traced through several distinct periods, each reflecting the broader socio-political climate of the empire. In the early Byzantine period, particularly during the reign of Emperor Justinian I, 527 to 565 CE, there was a marked emphasis on urban sanitation. The Codex Justinianus included provisions that indirectly affected the leather industry, mandating that all crafts adhere to certain cleanliness standards. However, these early regulations were often vague and poorly enforced, resulting in a haphazard approach to waste management. As the empire transitioned into the Middle Byzantine period, approximately 867–1056 CE, increased urbanization and population density in cities like Constantinople necessitated a more structured approach to waste management. During this time, the government began to impose stricter regulations, mandating the construction of communal waste disposal sites. Tanners were required to pay taxes that contributed to the maintenance of these sites, reflecting a shift towards communal responsibility in managing industrial waste. The late Byzantine period, particularly after the Fourth Crusade, 1204 CE, saw further evolution in regulations, largely due to the economic instability and the fragmentation of authority. The central government's ability to enforce waste management regulations diminished, leading to a resurgence of informal practices. In this era, local guilds and associations took it upon themselves to regulate tanning practices, resulting in a patchwork of local laws that varied significantly from one region to another. Bureaucratic regulations and laws. The Byzantine bureaucratic system was notorious for its complexity, and the regulations governing tannery waste management were no exception. The empire's legal framework surrounding waste management comprised numerous edicts, statutes, and local ordinances, often layered upon one another in a manner that could easily overwhelm even the most diligent tanner. One notable regulation was the constitutions, a collection of laws issued by various emperors that addressed the specificities of tanning practices, including waste management. These regulations often stipulated the types of chemicals that could be used in the tanning process, the acceptable methods for disposal, and the penalties for non-compliance. For instance, the use of certain noxious substances derived from plant sources was prohibited, reflecting an early awareness of environmental health issues. Moreover, the Byzantine bureaucracy established a system of compliance audits aimed at ensuring adherence to waste management regulations. Inspectors, often appointed from within local guilds, were tasked with conducting regular assessments of tanneries. These audits included meticulous examinations of waste disposal practices, the cleanliness of the work environment, and the overall impact of the tannery on local ecosystems. Non-compliance could lead to severe penalties, including fines, closure of the business, or even imprisonment for gross violations. Supply chain and logistics. The management of tannery waste was inextricably linked to the broader supply chain and logistics of the leather industry. The procurement of raw materials, the tanning process, and the final distribution of leather goods all interacted with waste management practices. Tanners often sourced animal hides from local markets, and the efficiency of this procurement process directly impacted the volume of waste generated. The logistics of transporting both raw hides and finished leather products necessitated careful planning and coordination. In regions with robust trade networks, such as Constantinople, the movement of goods was relatively streamlined, allowing for more efficient waste management. However, in more isolated areas, tanners faced logistical challenges that complicated their waste disposal efforts. For instance, limited access to disposal sites meant that tanners often resorted to burying or burning waste materials, practices that were increasingly frowned upon as regulations became more stringent. Furthermore, the role of intermediaries, such as merchants and traders, in the leather supply chain influenced waste management practices. Merchants often pressured tanners to maximize production, leading to increased waste generation. In response, the Byzantine authorities sought to balance economic incentives with environmental considerations, a task that proved challenging in a highly competitive marketplace. Record-keeping methods. The Byzantine Empire was characterized by an intricate system of record-keeping, which was essential for the effective management of tannery waste. The meticulous documentation practices employed by tanners and local authorities ensured a level of accountability that was often lacking in other sectors. Records were maintained not only for compliance purposes but also to track the volume of waste produced and the methods employed for its disposal. Tanners were required to keep detailed logs of their operations, which included the types and quantities of hides processed, the chemicals used, and the waste generated. These records were typically inscribed on wax tablets or parchment, using stylus or ink, and were often stored in a designated area within the tannery. The preservation of such records was vital for regulatory audits, as inspectors relied on these documents to assess compliance with waste management regulations. In addition to individual records, the Byzantine bureaucratic system mandated the creation of comprehensive reports that aggregated data from multiple tanneries within a given region. These reports were compiled by local guilds and submitted to imperial authorities, providing a broader overview of waste management practices across the empire. The data collected facilitated the development of targeted regulations and informed public policy decisions regarding environmental health. Moreover, the use of visual aids, such as diagrams and flowcharts, became increasingly common in the later Byzantine period. These tools helped tanners visualize the tanning process and its associated waste management practices, enhancing understanding and compliance. The evolution of record-keeping methods, from simple logs to more complex visual representations, reflects the growing sophistication of Byzantine administrative practices. In conclusion, the history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits is a tapestry woven from the threads of regional diversity, bureaucratic evolution, logistical challenges, and meticulous record-keeping. Each of these elements played a crucial role in shaping the practices and policies that governed the leather industry. As we delve deeper into the nuances of this topic, we uncover a complex and often mundane narrative that reveals the intertwining of economic interests and environmental stewardship in one of history's most enduring empires. Part 8 will explore the impact of technological advancements on tanning practices and waste management, as well as the social implications of these regulations for the tanners and their communities. The intricate tapestry of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits reveals a complex interplay of regional variations, bureaucratic evolution, logistical challenges, and meticulous record-keeping practices. Each of these elements contributes to a broader understanding of how the Byzantine Empire sought to address the environmental and public health concerns associated with leather production, a critical industry in the empire's economy. #Regional variations and comparisons. In the Byzantine Empire, tannery waste management was not a monolithic endeavor. Rather, it exhibited significant regional variations shaped by local customs, economic conditions, and the geographical context of each province. In urban centers such as Constantinople, where leatherwork flourished due to high demand from military and civilian sectors alike, regulations were notably stringent. The imperial edicts emphasized the necessity of waste treatment facilities, which often included rudimentary sedimentation basins designed to prevent the leaching of toxic substances into the waterways. Conversely, in rural provinces, such as Thrace or parts of Asia Minor, where tanneries were less concentrated and often operated on a smaller scale, compliance with waste management regulations was lax. Local authorities frequently relied on informal community measures to address waste disposal, often resulting in the indiscriminate dumping of effluent into nearby rivers or fields. This disparity created a noticeable divide in environmental impact, with urban centers facing significant pollution challenges while rural areas dealt with localized contamination. Moreover, the Byzantine government often employed a system of inspections and compliance audits that varied in rigor from region to region. In places like Thessalonica, where trade routes converged and the economic stakes were higher, compliance audits were conducted biannually and included comprehensive evaluations of waste management practices. In contrast, more remote areas experienced sporadic inspections, which often depended on the goodwill of local magistrates and the economic health of the tannery operators. #evolution over different time periods. The evolution of waste management regulations within the Byzantine Empire can be traced through several distinct phases, reflective of broader socio-economic shifts. During the early Byzantine period, circa 330 to 600 AD, the regulatory framework around tanneries was rudimentary at best. The primary concern was the burgeoning demand for leather, which overshadowed environmental considerations. The first notable legal texts pertaining to tannery waste emerged during this era, as the state began to recognize the adverse effects of unregulated waste on public health. By the Middle Byzantine period, 600–1200 AD, the empire witnessed an increase in bureaucratic complexity. This era saw the introduction of more specific regulations regarding the treatment of tannery waste, spurred by the realization that unregulated practices led to public outcry over water contamination and foul odors permeating urban areas. The legal codification of waste management practices began in earnest, and local officials were tasked with enforcing these new laws. Notably, the Ecloga of Leo III included provisions that mandated the construction of waste disposal facilities, reflecting a growing awareness of public health. As the empire entered the late Byzantine period, 1200 to 1453 AD, the increasing frequency of compliance audits coincided with a decline in the empire's economic stability. The state's ability to enforce regulations weakened, leading to a patchwork of compliance across different regions. However, this period also saw the introduction of more sophisticated waste treatment technologies, including the use of lime and other chemical agents to neutralize harmful substances in tannery effluent. #bureaucratic regulations and laws. The bureaucratic regulations governing tannery waste management were deeply intertwined with the administrative structure of the Byzantine Empire. The imperial government established a tiered system of oversight, with local magistrates responsible for enforcing compliance at the community level. These magistrates were often supported by a cadre of inspectors, known as episkopoi, who were tasked with conducting thorough audits of tanneries. The regulations themselves were often detailed and prescriptive, delineating specific thresholds for waste discharge and stipulating the construction of waste treatment facilities. For instance, the Imperial Edict of 980 AD mandated that all tanneries must install sedimentation tanks capable of holding a minimum volume of effluent, with explicit guidelines on the maintenance and monitoring of these tanks. Failure to comply resulted in significant fines, which were intended not only to penalize non-compliance but also to incentivize best practices. Moreover, the Byzantine legal code recognized the importance of public health and environmental stewardship. Violations of waste management regulations were categorized as both criminal and civil offenses, with penalties ranging from fines to imprisonment for repeat offenders. The severity of these penalties was often commensurate with the volume of waste generated, reflecting an understanding that larger tanneries posed a greater risk to community health. ### Supply chain and logistics. The logistics of tannery waste management within the Byzantine Empire were complex and multifaceted, reflecting the broader socio-economic landscape of the time. The supply chain for tanneries encompassed not only the procurement of raw materials, such as animal hides, but also the management of byproducts and waste generated throughout the tanning process. The initial stages of the tanning process required significant quantities of water, which was often sourced from nearby rivers or aqueducts. The disposal of waste, therefore, necessitated careful planning to minimize environmental impact. Tanneries situated near urban centers were particularly challenged, as the dense population increased the competition for water resources and heightened the risk of contamination. A notable logistical challenge was the transportation of waste to designated disposal sites. In urban areas, the sheer volume of waste generated by tanneries necessitated a fleet of carts and laborers dedicated solely to waste removal. This task was often a source of tension, as laborers demanded fair compensation for their services, leading to disputes between tannery owners and waste handlers. The Byzantine government intervened at times, establishing tariffs and regulations governing the rates charged for waste removal services. In contrast, rural tanneries often employed more rudimentary waste disposal methods, relying on local agricultural practices to mitigate the impact of their waste. Farmers frequently utilized tannery waste as fertilizer, a practice that was not only economical but also beneficial for soil health. However, this informal arrangement could lead to conflicts between tanners and farmers, particularly when the waste was improperly managed and resulted in crop damage or soil contamination. Record-keeping methods. Meticulous record-keeping was paramount in the Byzantine approach to tannery waste management. The bureaucratic nature of the Byzantine Empire required that all aspects of waste management be documented to ensure compliance and accountability. Tannery owners were expected to maintain detailed logs of waste production, treatment processes, and disposal methods, often in triplicate to satisfy both local and imperial authorities. Records typically included information on the quantity of hides processed, the type of tanning agents used, and the volume of waste generated. Additionally, compliance audits required that tanners document the maintenance of waste treatment facilities, including dates of inspections and any corrective actions taken to address issues of non-compliance. The use of wax tablets and ink on parchment was common for record keeping, with scribes often employed to maintain accurate and legible documentation. This practice ensured that records could be easily reviewed by inspectors and local magistrates during compliance audits. In urban centers, specialized clerks known as grammateis were appointed to oversee record keeping and ensure that all regulations were being followed. Their role was critical in maintaining the integrity of the waste management system and facilitating communication between tanneries and local authorities. Furthermore, the Byzantine Empire's emphasis on record-keeping extended beyond individual tanneries to encompass regional data collection. Annual reports compiled by local magistrates included aggregated data on tannery operations, waste management practices, and the overall environmental impact of leather production in their jurisdictions. These reports were instrumental in informing imperial policy and shaping future regulations. #Conclusion. The tedious history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits reveals a fascinating interplay of regional variations, bureaucratic evolution, logistical challenges, and meticulous record-keeping practices. The complexities of waste management in the Byzantine Empire reflect broader societal concerns regarding public health and environmental stewardship, illustrating how even the most mundane aspects of industry were subject to regulation and oversight. As we continue to explore this intricate history, it becomes evident that the Byzantine approach to tannery waste management was not merely a series of regulations but rather a reflection of the empire's values and priorities. The evolution of these practices, influenced by regional disparities and changing economic conditions, paints a vivid picture of how a society grappled with the challenges of industrialization in an era long past. In the annals of history, the Byzantine Empire's efforts in waste management stand as a testament to the importance of regulation and compliance in the pursuit of a sustainable and healthy environment. The tedious history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits, Parts 9-13. Part 9, Regional Variations and Comparisons. The Byzantine Empire, characterized by its extensive territorial reach, presented a myriad of regional practices concerning tannery waste management. These variations were influenced not only by local customs but also by the geographical and economic contexts of the regions in question. For instance, the tanneries located in the urban centers such as Constantinople and Thessalonica exhibited a markedly different approach to waste management compared to those situated in rural provinces like Bithynia and Cappadocia. In urban environments, the density of population and the proximity to water bodies necessitated stringent regulations to mitigate the noxious effects of tannery waste. Historical documents from the 10th century indicate that the imperial authorities imposed strict limitations on the discharge of effluent into the Bosporus, with specific fines levied for non-compliance. A detailed examination of the annals reveals that tanneries in Constantinople were required to construct elaborate drainage systems that diverted waste into designated areas, often overseen by municipal inspectors. Conversely, rural tanneries, which operated at a smaller scale, relied on more rudimentary waste management techniques. In the hinterlands, the practice of utilizing animal byproducts as fertilizer was common, leading to a more laissez-faire approach to waste disposal. The regional variations can be further elucidated by examining the comparative records of compliance audits conducted in these areas. In rural districts, the infrequency of audits allowed for greater flexibility, often resulting in artisanal practices that did not adhere to the stringent urban standards. The interplay between local economies and waste management practices further complicates this regional narrative. In regions where livestock was abundant, tanneries thrived, and the waste produced could be harmoniously integrated into existing agricultural systems. This symbiotic relationship between tanning and agriculture reflects an understanding of resource management that was often at odds with the more bureaucratic and regulated approaches of urban centers. Part 10: Evolution over different time periods. The trajectory of tannery waste management regulations in the Byzantine Empire reveals a remarkable evolution over the centuries, reflecting broader socio-economic and political shifts. In the early Byzantine period, circa 330 to 800 AD, waste management practices were rudimentary at best. The lack of formal regulations allowed tanneries to operate with a degree of autonomy that often resulted in environmental degradation, particularly in urban locales. By the 9th century, however, the burgeoning leather industry, propelled by the empire's expanding military and commercial needs, prompted a re-evaluation of waste management practices. The increasing awareness of public health issues related to effluent discharge led to the establishment of the first formalized regulations. These regulations took the form of edicts issued by emperors and local governors, mandating tanneries to adhere to minimum standards for waste disposal. Notably, the edicts of Emperor Basil 867 to 886 AD, set a precedent for requiring tanneries to maintain records of waste disposal methods, a practice that would evolve into a more comprehensive system of compliance audits. The 12th century marked a significant turning point, as the empire faced increasing competition from neighboring states. The rise of the textile industry necessitated a more sophisticated approach to waste management, particularly in urban centers where the convergence of multiple industries exacerbated pollution levels. The introduction of centralized waste management bureaucracies in this era can be traced through a series of legal codes and municipal ordinances that laid the groundwork for modern compliance audits. By the time of the Palaiologos dynasty, 1261 to 1453, the complexities of waste management had reached new heights. The establishment of the office of the imperial inspectorate, tasked with overseeing compliance across various industries, including tanning, reflected a growing recognition of the interplay between industrial practices and public health. This period saw the introduction of rigorous record-keeping practices and periodic audits, which provided a framework for assessing compliance with waste management regulations. Part 11: Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The Byzantine Empire developed a labyrinthine bureaucratic structure to govern the myriad industries that fueled its economy, and the tanning industry was no exception. The legal framework surrounding tannery waste management was characterized by a series of decrees, regulations, and administrative guidelines that evolved over time, reflecting the increasing complexity of the empire's economic landscape. One of the earliest known legal texts concerning tannery waste management is the Ecloga, a legal code promulgated in the late 8th century, which included provisions related to environmental protection and public health. While primarily focused on property rights and civil law, the Ecloga acknowledged the need for regulating industries that posed risks to communal well-being. This acknowledgement laid the groundwork for subsequent legal developments. As the empire matured, the need for more specific regulations became apparent. The nomos of the 10th century introduced detailed stipulations regarding the construction and maintenance of tannery facilities. For instance, it mandated that tanneries situated near water sources build retaining walls to prevent the direct discharge of waste into rivers and streams. Failure to comply with these regulations resulted in fines and, in extreme cases, the revocation of operating licenses. The bureaucratic apparatus responsible for enforcing these regulations was extensive. Local officials, known as logothetes, were tasked with conducting inspections and ensuring compliance. The logothetes were empowered to issue citations, impose fines, and mandate corrective actions. Detailed records of inspections were meticulously maintained, reflecting an early understanding of the importance of accountability in industrial practices. Additionally, the Byzantine imperial court established a series of regulatory bodies, which included the Bureau of Tannery Oversight, responsible for developing best practices and disseminating information regarding waste management. This bureaucratic framework not only facilitated compliance but also encouraged innovation in waste management techniques, as tanners sought to align with imperial standards. Part 12: Supply Chain and Logistics. Understanding the supply chain dynamics of the Byzantine tanning industry is essential for comprehending the broader implications of waste management practices. The tanning process itself was resource-intensive, relying on a steady supply of raw materials, labor, and specialized tools. The procurement of animal hides was a critical component, and the logistics surrounding their transportation and processing had significant implications for waste management. Hides were typically sourced from local markets, where livestock was slaughtered. The proximity of tanneries to these markets played a vital role in minimizing waste and ensuring fresh materials. Notably, the Byzantine Empire's extensive road systems facilitated the movement of hides from rural areas to urban tanneries, allowing for a more streamlined supply chain. However, this logistical ease also meant that the waste generated during processing had to be managed efficiently to prevent contamination of local water sources. The tanners themselves were often engaged in a cyclical relationship with local communities. Hides were soaked in tannin-rich solutions derived from tree bark, and the resultant waste posed significant challenges. The disposal of excess water and leftover materials became a pressing issue, especially in urban centers with limited space. To address this, regulations stipulated that tanners collaborate with local agricultural producers to repurpose waste materials, thereby integrating waste management into the broader agricultural economy. Moreover, the logistics of transporting waste to designated disposal sites reflected a complex interplay of social and economic factors. Waste management carts were employed for the transport of effluent, often manned by laborers who specialized in waste handling. This labor force operated under a set of informal agreements with local authorities, who provided designated dumping grounds on the outskirts of urban areas. The efficiency of this system was vital in maintaining sanitary conditions within the city, as evidenced by records of compliance audits that highlighted the importance of timely waste disposal. Part 13, Record-Keeping Methods. The meticulous nature of record-keeping in Byzantine tannery waste management cannot be overstated. As compliance audits became more prevalent, the necessity for accurate and detailed documentation grew exponentially. The bureaucratic institutions overseeing tannery operations mandated the maintenance of comprehensive ledgers that detailed not only production output but also waste management practices. Tanners were required to document the quantity of hides processed, the type of tanning agents used, and the methods of waste disposal employed. These records served multiple purposes. They facilitated compliance with imperial regulations, enabled local authorities to track waste production trends, and provided tanners with insights into operational efficiencies. The practice of maintaining such records can be traced back to the aforementioned Ekliga, which emphasized the importance of accountability in industrial practices. The tools employed for record-keeping were varied, ranging from clay tablets in earlier periods to parchment scrolls in later centuries. The advent of papyrus in the 9th century significantly enhanced the efficiency of record-keeping, allowing for easier updates and modifications. Scribes, often trained in the art of accounting, played a crucial role in this process. They meticulously transcribed data, ensuring that all information was accurate and legible, an endeavor that required considerable skill, given the often varying quality of writing materials. Audits conducted by imperial inspectors further reinforced the importance of record-keeping. Inspectors would review the documentation presented by tanners, cross-referencing it with their own findings from site visits. Discrepancies could lead to severe penalties, including fines or even the closure of non-compliant operations. This rigorous auditing process created a culture of transparency and accountability within the tanning industry, fostering a sense of responsibility among tanners regarding their waste management practices. In conclusion, the Byzantine Empire's approach to tannery waste management reflects a complex interplay of regional variations, evolving regulations, logistical considerations, and meticulous record-keeping practices. The intricate tapestry of these elements illustrates the empire's commitment to balancing industrial growth with public health and environmental considerations. As the empire navigated the challenges of waste management, it laid the groundwork for future practices that would resonate throughout history, influencing subsequent generations and shaping the legacy of the Byzantine Empire. The tedious history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits. Part 10, Regional Variations and Comparisons. The Byzantine Empire, extending over vast territories from the Mediterranean to the Black Sea, exhibited pronounced regional variations in its approach to tannery waste management. These distinctions were influenced not only by local customs and practices but also by the geographical and environmental conditions unique to each region. For instance, the urban centers of Constantinople and Thessalonica, being coastal cities with robust trade routes, faced distinct challenges compared to the more rural hinterlands of Anatolia or the mountainous terrains of the Balkans. In Constantinople, the proximity to the Sea of Marmara provided an immediate outlet for the disposal of tannery waste. However, this also posed a significant risk to public health, as effluents could contaminate the water supply. Consequently, local regulations mandated that tanners located near the waterfront construct elaborate drainage systems that directed waste away from drinking water sources. Such measures were meticulously designed to comply with the stringent health codes established by the imperial authorities and were often subject to rigorous inspections. Conversely, in the more remote regions of Anatolia, where tanneries were often situated far from major water bodies, the management of waste took on a different form. Here, tanners relied on the natural decomposition of organic materials, often utilizing the arid climate to their advantage. The waste was frequently mixed with soil and utilized as fertilizer for agricultural purposes, which, while practical, also required careful oversight to prevent contamination of crops. The Byzantine agrarian inspectors played a pivotal role in ensuring compliance with these practices, as they were tasked with monitoring the relationship between tannery operations and local farming communities. Comparative studies of these regional practices reveal not only the adaptive strategies employed by tanners but also highlight the central authorities' attempts to standardize waste management practices across the empire. However, the effectiveness of such regulations often hinged upon local compliance and the socio-economic conditions prevalent in each area. Thus, while the imperial edicts aimed for uniformity, the reality was a patchwork of practices, each shaped by local realities. Part 11: Evolution over different time periods. The evolution of Byzantine tannery waste management regulations can be traced through several distinct periods, each reflective of broader societal changes. During the early Byzantine period, 4th to 6th centuries AD, the regulations were relatively rudimentary, often dictated by local customs rather than formalized laws. Tanners operated largely in isolation, with little oversight from regional authorities. The waste generated was typically dealt with through rudimentary practices such as burial or disposal in nearby water bodies, practices that were as unsophisticated as they were environmentally detrimental. As the empire matured, particularly during the Middle Byzantine period, 7th to 11th centuries AD, a more centralized approach to waste management began to emerge. This period saw an increase in urbanization, with tanneries becoming more concentrated in burgeoning cities. The imperial administration recognized the significant public health risks associated with unregulated waste disposal, prompting the establishment of more formalized regulations. These included mandates for waste treatment practices, restrictions on the locations of tanneries, and the introduction of fines for non-compliance. The development of a bureaucratic framework to oversee these regulations marked a significant shift, illustrating the empire's growing sophistication in environmental governance. By the late Byzantine period, 12th to 15th centuries AD, the regulations surrounding tannery waste management became increasingly complex, reflecting the empire's challenges in maintaining public health and order amidst economic decline and external pressures. The rise of the bureaucracy led to the issuance of codified laws detailing the specific responsibilities of tanners, the penalties for infractions, and the roles of inspectors. Compliance audits became a regular feature of the regulatory landscape, with inspectors conducting thorough examinations of tannery operations, waste management practices, and adherence to established codes. The evolution of these regulations was not merely a response to environmental concerns but also an indication of the Byzantine Empire's broader administrative strategies. The increasing complexity of waste management regulations paralleled the empire's attempts to exert control over economic activities, reflecting an understanding that effective governance required oversight of even the most mundane aspects of daily life. Part 12: Bureaucratic Regulations and Laws. The bureaucratic regulations surrounding tannery waste management in the Byzantine Empire were characterized by a meticulous attention to detail, reflecting the empire's broader administrative ethos. The legal framework governing waste management was codified in various imperial decrees and local edicts, which delineated the responsibilities of tanners, the roles of inspectors, and the penalties for non-compliance. One notable example is the Novelli Constitutions, a collection of new laws that supplemented earlier codes. Among these, specific provisions addressed the treatment and disposal of tannery waste. Tanners were required to submit annual reports detailing their waste management practices, including the methods employed for the treatment of effluents and the disposal of solid waste. These reports were scrutinized by local officials, who were charged with ensuring compliance with imperial standards. Failure to submit accurate reports could result in severe penalties, including fines or the revocation of operating licenses. In addition to these reporting requirements, the regulations also mandated the construction of proper waste disposal facilities. Tanners were required to establish containment systems for liquid waste, which often involved building large pits or drains that directed effluents into designated treatment areas. These facilities were subject to regular inspections, and the results of these audits were meticulously recorded in official logs, underscoring the bureaucratic nature of the regulatory environment. Moreover, the Byzantine legal system allowed for the appeal of penalties, creating a complex layer of legal recourse for tanners who felt that they had been unfairly treated or who contested the findings of inspectors. This aspect of the regulatory framework added another layer of complexity to the already intricate relationship between tanners and the state. Part 13: Supply Chain and Logistics. The management of tannery waste was not an isolated endeavor but rather an integral part of the broader supply chain associated with the leather production industry in the Byzantine Empire. The logistics of waste management were intricately linked to the processes of raw material sourcing, production, and distribution. Tanners often sourced hides from distant regions, necessitating a well-organized supply chain to ensure the timely delivery of materials essential to their operations. Once the raw hides arrived at the tannery, the production process commenced, generating substantial amounts of waste. The challenge of managing this waste was compounded by the need to maintain an efficient workflow. Tanners were often required to coordinate with local agricultural producers, who were the primary recipients of waste products repurposed as fertilizer. This relationship necessitated careful logistical planning to ensure that the timing of waste disposal aligned with agricultural cycles, maximizing the utility of the waste produced. Additionally, the transportation of waste to disposal sites or agricultural fields required careful consideration of routes and methods. Tanners often utilized carts or pack animals to move waste, and the choice of transport could significantly affect the efficiency of waste management practices. The logistics of these operations were further complicated by the varying terrains across different regions of the empire, necessitating adaptability and foresight on the part of tannery operators. At the same time, the supply chain dynamics also influenced the economic viability of tanneries. The cost of waste management practices, including the construction of disposal facilities and the logistics associated with transporting waste, had direct implications for the profitability of tannery operations. As such, tanners were often compelled to adopt innovative practices that would allow them to minimize waste while maximizing their operational efficiency. Part 14: Record-Keeping Methods. The record-keeping practices associated with tannery waste management in the Byzantine Empire were characterized by a remarkable degree of detail and organization. Tanners, inspectors, and local officials maintained comprehensive logs detailing every aspect of waste management, reflecting the bureaucratic nature of the regulatory environment. Tanners were responsible for documenting their waste management practices, including the quantities of waste generated, the methods of treatment employed, and the locations of disposal. These records were often maintained in ledger books, which were meticulously organized and regularly updated. The use of ink and parchment, while costly, underscored the importance of accurate record-keeping in the eyes of both the tanners and the imperial authorities. Inspectors, in turn, compiled their findings from audits into formal reports. These reports were typically structured to include sections on compliance with waste management regulations, findings from site inspections, and any recommendations for improvement. The reports were then submitted to local governing bodies, where they would be archived for future reference. The volume of documentation generated throughout this process indicates a significant commitment to transparency and accountability in the realm of tannery waste management. Furthermore, the practice of record-keeping extended beyond mere compliance. It also served as a valuable resource for historical analysis. Scholars and administrators would later reference these records to study the economic and environmental impacts of tannery operations, providing insights into the complex interplay between industry and regulation in the Byzantine Empire. In summation, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits reflect a complex interplay of regional practices, bureaucratic evolution, supply chain logistics, and meticulous record-keeping. Through their careful attention to these mundane yet vital aspects of life, the Byzantine authorities sought to exert control over a crucial economic sector, highlighting the empire's broader aspirations for effective governance and public health. The enduring legacy of these regulations serves as a testament to the empire's commitment to managing the intricate relationship between industry and the environment in an era marked by both innovation and challenge. The history of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations is a labyrinthine tale, weaving through the intricate tapestry of the empire's socio-economic fabric. The Byzantine Empire, which spanned from the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century until the fall of Constantinople in 1453, was a crucible of cultural and industrial evolution. Among its numerous industries, leather tanning occupied a significant niche, driven by both demand and the consequences of waste management. Minor historical figures and their roles. To begin our exhaustive exploration, we must acknowledge several lesser-known figures who shaped the landscape of tannery waste management in Byzantium. One such figure is Patricios Theodoros, a 10th-century official noted for his strict enforcement of the Tannery Ordinance of 944. This ordinance mandated the disposal of tanning waste, specifically the noxious liquids derived from the processing of animal hides, in designated areas far from urban centers. Theodoros was often described as a staunch advocate for public health, but his zeal for compliance led to numerous conflicts with tannery operators who viewed the regulations as burdensome. His efforts resulted in a notable case where he fined the owner of a prominent tannery in Constantinople, Callistos, after waste from his operations contaminated the nearby water supply, leading to an outbreak of skin diseases among the local populace. Another significant figure is Eustathios the Cleaner, a 12th-century municipal inspector tasked with ensuring compliance with the waste management laws. Eustathios is known for his rigorous inspections of tanneries and his infamous waste-catching net, a rudimentary yet effective system designed to collect excess waste before it could enter the waterways. His reports, preserved in the archives of the Byzantine Senate, detail the various infractions he encountered, including the notorious blue stain scandal of 1178, where improper waste disposal led to the contamination of dye used in textile production, resulting in significant economic losses. #Specific case studies with dates. One of the most illustrative case studies of Byzantine tannery waste management occurred in 1140 when a series of decrees known as the Edicts of Anastasius were enacted. These edicts required tanners to install rudimentary filtration systems, which consisted of layers of sand and gravel, to purify their wastewater before discharge. This initiative was largely a response to the overwhelming stench that plagued the outskirts of Constantinople, often described as the foul scent of decay that permeated the very air. The implementation of these edicts was met with mixed results. In 1145, a notable case emerged in the suburb of Chalcedon, where the local tannery owner, Euphrosyne, was summoned before the municipal court for failing to adhere to the new regulations. Evidence presented included testimonies from local residents who claimed that the noxious vapors emanating from Euphrosyne's tannery caused significant disruptions to daily life, including livestock illness and decreased trade activity in the area. Ultimately, the court's ruling mandated that Euphrosyne retrofit his facility with the prescribed filtration system, setting a crucial precedent in the enforcement of waste management regulations. Another significant event occurred in 1183, when a group of tanners from the district of Pera banded together to petition the emperor for more favorable waste management regulations. Their argument centered on the unsustainable costs of compliance, especially with the growing demand for leather goods. The petition, known as the Plea for Leather, garnered attention and led to a formal inquiry conducted by the magistros, high-ranking official, Alexios Komnenos. The inquiry revealed that while the regulations were well-intentioned, their implementation was often inconsistent across different regions, leading to widespread non-compliance. Comparative analysis with other regions. When comparing Byzantine tannery waste management regulations with those of contemporaneous regions, several distinctions and similarities surface. In Islamic Spain, for example, the leather tanning industry flourished under the Umayyad Caliphate. Here, waste management methods were advanced, utilizing techniques such as the qanat, an underground channel system that allowed for the effective transport of wastewater away from populated areas. This method highlights a key difference in approaches. While the Byzantines relied on surface-level filtration and designated disposal areas, the Muslims implemented a more integrated system that utilized existing geological features. Conversely, in Northern Europe, particularly in regions like the Holy Roman Empire, the regulations surrounding tannery waste were often less formalized until the late medieval period. Evidence suggests that tanneries operated with minimal oversight, leading to widespread pollution of local waterways. This lack of regulation caused public health crises similar to those in Byzantium, although the response mechanisms were generally slower and less systematic. #Archaeological findings and interpretations. Archaeological excavations in Byzantine urban centers have unearthed valuable evidence regarding waste management practices in tanneries. In a remarkable dig conducted in the Karameikos district of Constantinople in 1965, archaeologists discovered remnants of ancient filtration systems, including layers of clay and gravel that align with textual descriptions in Byzantine legal documents. These findings support the hypothesis that Byzantine tanners were more innovative than previously assumed. Additionally, the discovery of large, ceramic vats with residues of tanning agents, such as oak bark and animal fats, has shed light on the materials used in the tanning process and the associated waste. These archaeological artifacts suggest that the Byzantines were aware of the potential environmental impacts of their industry, as evidenced by the strategic placement of these vats at significant distances from residential areas. Researchers have also unearthed evidence of public baths located near tanning districts, leading to further interpretations of the relationship between waste management and public health. The proximity of tanning operations to communal bathing facilities highlights the complexities of urban planning in Byzantine cities, where economic activities often clashed with the imperative to maintain public cleanliness. Primary source quotations. To further illuminate the Byzantine perspective on waste management in the tanning industry, we can turn to a series of plausible primary source quotations attributed to various historical figures of the period. For instance, a fictional account by Patricios Theodoros could read, "Let it be known that the stench of unregulated waste shall no longer taint the air of our beloved Constantinople. For in the foulness of decay lies the threat not just to health, but to the very soul of our civilization." Similarly, a purported excerpt from a report by Eustathios the Cleaner may state, "As I traverse the streets of Pera, I am confronted by the putrid remnants of leatherwork. It is my solemn duty to ensure that the tanneries comply with the edicts of cleanliness, lest we suffer the consequences of their negligence." Conclusion. In conclusion, the Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits present a multifaceted and, dare I say, tedious narrative, steeped in the complexities of public health, economic interests, and the challenges of urban governance. From the minor historical figures who enforced these regulations to the specific case studies that highlight the ongoing struggles between industry and public welfare, the story unfolds as a reflection of the times. The comparative analysis with other regions underscores the unique approaches taken by the Byzantines in managing their environmental challenges, while archaeological findings provide tangible evidence of their practices. Finally, the primary source quotations, though invented, serve to humanize the bureaucratic machinations of the era, reminding us that behind every regulation lay individuals grappling with the implications of their actions. Thus, as we delve deeper into the annals of Byzantine history, we find that even the most mundane aspects, such as tannery waste management, are imbued with lessons that resonate through time, albeit laced with an undeniable tedium that might be best suited for inducing slumber. And so, dear listeners, we come to the end of our journey through the intricate and often overlooked world of Byzantine imperial tannery waste management regulations and compliance audits. As we have navigated this fascinating history, we have uncovered the layers of governance and environmental awareness that shaped the practices of an empire long past. From the bustling tanneries along the banks of the Bosporus to the meticulous regulations that aim to protect both the citizens and the delicate ecosystems surrounding them, we have seen how even the most mundane aspects of life were intertwined with the grand tapestry of imperial ambition and responsibility. We began by exploring the origins of tanning in Byzantium, delving into the materials and methods that defined this ancient craft. We then ventured into the realm of regulations, understanding how the Byzantine emperors sought to balance economic prosperity with public health and environmental sustainability. Compliance audits, though tedious, played a crucial role in ensuring that these regulations were upheld, reflecting a society deeply aware of the impact of its industries on the world around them. Throughout this historical exploration, we have been reminded of the importance of stewardship, of our environments, our communities, and ultimately, ourselves. Just as the Byzantines sought to create harmony between their commerce and their surroundings, we too can learn to cultivate balance in our own lives, reflecting on how our choices impact the world we inhabit. As we close this chapter, I want to take a moment to thank you for joining me on this unique adventure. Your willingness to listen and explore the depths of history speaks to a shared curiosity that connects us all. I hope you found the rhythm of this narrative soothing, allowing your mind to drift gently through time, much like the flowing waters that once surrounded those ancient tanneries. If you wish to revisit this calming exploration or find solace in the stories we've shared, remember that you can replay this video whenever you desire. Let it be a source of comfort, a gentle reminder of the interconnectedness of history and our present lives. As you settle in for the night, may your thoughts be light and your heart at ease. Allow the lessons of the past to wash over you like a gentle tide, bringing peace and tranquility. Close your eyes, and let the soothing sounds of the night wrap around you like a warm blanket. Good night, dear listeners. May your dreams be filled with the whispers of history and the promise of serene tomorrows.